Tiff. I was at the premiere of Saturday Night, the telling of the chaotic 90 minutes leading up to the first ever episode of SNL. This movie was still filming in like the first quarter of this year, so the fact that it's making a festival run in September is pretty nuts. It has a stacked cast, mainly headlined by a lot of young talent, sprinkled in with some vets like my fucking goat Willem Dafoe. Described as a comedy thriller, highly touted to be a crowd pleaser, some of which believe it can win the coveted TIFF People's Choice Award, which has a very good correlation to the Oscars. Is it actually a good movie, or is it just an SNL cosplay? Well, I really enjoyed it. The filmmaking from Jason Reitman is much stronger than I expected. It's a very tight script with little fluff, and just like the first episode of SNL, this seemed like a hassle to pull off. There are a lot of long takes in this where the camera is just moving and tracking from different characters, and the amount of moving parts and choreography with the cast and extras is very impressive. The camera will swing from room to room with constant movement as people walk in front of the camera. The dialogue's overlapping as people constantly talk over each other, and immediately throws you into a headspace of Jesus Christ, how does anyone get anything done? It's a much stronger directorial effort from Jason Reitman compared to his Ghostbusters films lately.
Why do people call you Podcast? Oh, I call myself Podcast because of my podcast.
God, please, no!
And a neat thing about this is the movie does move in real time. There will be title cards of the clock periodically that aligns with the runtime, so needless to say that this movie moves fast and isn't very long, which I appreciate, especially at a tiring festival like this. It can be a nice palate cleanser. And look, I'm a chaotic guy. Does that make sense? I'll admit I enjoy chaos as long as it isn't happening to me, and my friends would call me a bit of an instigator. So yeah, I can't lie, I enjoyed seeing shit go wrong here. Actors screaming at each other, fighting, contract disputes, broken equipment, creative executives, and the Green Goblin looming over you. I mean, it does make for some anxious moments. But even as a chaos agent myself, I didn't want a movie that's like an hour 40 of just like, wow, look at everything that goes wrong, because we all know it works out in the end. SNL is literally heading into its 50th season this year, so like everyone knows how it's gonna work out. And I was having a good time with it, but all the mishaps started to feel a little trivial. Like, oh, the talent is arguing about a costume, or like, oh, we're going over, we need to cut some sketches. So as the movie was progressing, even though I was enjoying it, I was getting nervous that this was all the movie was gonna be. In order for this movie to be successful for myself, I needed the stakes to be raised, which I realize is a tricky thing to do, considering we all know SNL goes on to be one of the biggest influences on culture for a bit, but I needed it to be raised outside of like, look how hard it is to make things. And without giving spoilers away, there is a scene that did that for me. It took it to a much darker place. The rest of the movie is completely fun and it's lively, and this made it real. And while yes, it is just a scene, and I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but I think that scene speaks very largely and looms over that fear that people have of going into Hollywood and show business. And while I do appreciate a movie that makes the message of like, look how hard it is to make anything, let alone a TV show, I needed that one scene because it felt like a looming umbrella over Hollywood and show business that I needed to see to take this from, okay, this was a fun time, to, okay, this is actually good. And they managed to raise the stakes on that, even for just a moment. And for something where we all know that it's working out for them in the long run with SNL, that's an impressive thing to do. And the score by Jon Batiste is absolutely amazing. It was played live on set by Batiste, who also plays an actual character in the movie, but it's lively, it's chaotic, and it is one of my favorite scores of the years, quite frankly. Now, this isn't a movie without flaws, don't get me wrong. In fact, if I'm being totally honest, I think a lot of people will come away from this movie just being like, it's fine. And I also don't have some huge attachment to SNL either, so, you know, keep that in mind. But the main thing is that I can totally see people thinking this is just a hollow exercise. And the main reason for that is the lack of any real emotional connection. As mentioned, it is operating at a disadvantage since everyone knows it works out for them in the end. And to the movie's credit, it doesn't try to position any one character in front of the audience and like really have them root for them. We follow Gabriel LaBelle's Lorne Michaels the most, but the movie isn't interested in saying like, hey audience, look how hard this guy's working, please root for him. It's more so just showing like, look how crazy this shit is, and that's not going to work for some people. And while I found that one scene to kind of recontextualize what this movie's about, I can still see some people being like, this movie doesn't have anything to say outside of making things as hard. So look, it's totally fair if people walk out of this movie with kind of like a shrug on them, like, okay, so what? Now, I think the ensemble works very well. Gabriel LaBelle is a very steady presence. I know he is playing much older and he still looks really young, but I just personally don't really care about that. My standouts are Cooper Hoffman, who is kind of Lorne Michaels' right-hand man who wants to see him succeed, but also toes the line between executive and creative. He has a great scene in the stairwell, which has already been featured in the trailer. It's great. He's a good Nepo baby. And Corey Michael Smith as Chevy Chase is also a big standout. I want to say he has a big part in this, but I also wouldn't be surprised if I find out he has like 10 minutes of screen time because he just feels larger in the movie. He never leans into impersonation, and he might be my favorite performance in the whole film. Overall, I really enjoyed Saturday Night. It's a very well made and well acted movie that delivers on what's expected of it. Some might shrug it off, but I found it very impressive and one that I definitely want to see again. Saturday Night, 3.5 stars. Sorry I tripped over my penis is a really good line though. Like that That's a great line. Can't relate, but that's a great line.